So, guys, welcome back to another week of the Unashamed Truth podcast. With me, we have Lori. We have Randy, who's back this week for another to continue our discussion that we were having last week on "Am I Christian enough?" and what that kind of concept is. Thanks for joining us again, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good. So,
So
how's everybody's week?
I'm just happy that it's raining now. Things can cool down a bit. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like I've been robbed of my AC because it feels like it hasn't been doing anything the last 2 days.
Oh man.
hmm
So I'm in a happy place right now.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame
Nice.
you. I
Mm.
was contemplating doing this podcast in my boxers, man, because it was so hot.
I feel you. Yeah.
So God is good because it rained.
Yeah.
You, bro.
We
I
needed
feel
it.
it.
Yeah.
We definitely needed it.
Oh,
man.
guys, hang on. Before we continue, we must say congratulations to Lori. So Lori completed her, I think, probably the most difficult year of her life.
Yeah.
So Lori
Yes.
is studying to be a nurse practitioner, um, and
Wow.
we learned this through her. But essentially, um, they cram like the first 4 years of medical school into 1 year for these nurses. So we've seen her in her ups and we've seen her in her downs, but we're very proud of her to, we saw,
Mostly downs, but yeah.
no, there were some ups too. And so we're very proud of her. Congratulations, Lori, for the
Thank
hard work that you
you.
did.
Yes.
So
Thanks.
this
Excellent.
is one of kind of three hurdles. So the next hurdle is she starts her internship, where she'll be working in the
Okay.
hospital. And
Yep.
and after that, it's your licensing, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
We're not thinking about that right now.
But you're making us
One
proud
thing at a
because we're
time.
another black face in the medical industry, and hopefully that's going to be a face that people. I know that some people unfortunately treat nurses of color poorly, but I'm hoping that there will be at least one patient who will feel able to express themselves to you more than they would maybe a white nurse or something like that, just on account of the fact that you're more relatable to them. So keep
Yeah.
up the
Yeah.
good work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Thanks,
So-
everyone.
Congratulations.
You're very welcome. So last week we were talking about the idea of what it means to be Christian enough, and then we started kind of veering towards this topic of black identity within church. And some of the questions that we were asking was like, for instance, do you feel that sometimes blackness gets tokenized in church? Or one question we didn't get to actually that I was interested to hear your answers was, have you guys ever had to downplay your blackness to kind of fit in within the church realm? And I'm not sure like necessarily where everybody stands on that. I think Dwight gift in my experience may be a little different because we went to a church that was structured a certain way. But I know
Mhm.
Lori, you grew up in a church. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the church that you grew up in?
Yeah. So I grew up in a church that was started up by a man that came from Colombia. It was a very diverse church, mostly Latino from all over, and then we had Black, Haitian, and then Black African. Um, and so it was a very, very diverse, but it was predominantly Latino.
Mhm.
I felt like that experience was very positive in the sense of my my other life growing up was very, very white. I went to
Mhm.
private school and it was very much not my world. Felt like an outcast everywhere else. So that felt better. Not like this is my crew. Like it was not all Black. It was not all people that looked like me. Um, so I wouldn't say I had to downplay being Black because I don't think I understood what being Black was. Like I didn't have kind of the stereotype, like I need to have the sass and I need to have this, type of attitude and whatever. So I kind of just grew up not really knowing what I was supposed to be. And then I think it became more like the things that I kept hearing about me being Black were that I wasn't. So I was too white. I liked to list. I liked rock. I had phases for everything, but I liked rock and I liked reading. I was a pretty quiet person. And so it was very much, where is the Black person here, right? But because I never was surrounded by Black people, like I think the only way I could have gone to like model Black behavior would have been TV, which would have been horrible. I'm so thankful I didn't I
Yeah.
didn't go that way. But I didn't find any models that I could really, try to copy or whatever.
Yeah.
So I kind of just ended up, giving the world what I knew, which ended up being me, I guess. But yeah, so like downplaying the Blackness, no. Looking for what Black was supposed to be, yes.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah, I get you. Sorry, I don't want to seem like I wasn't paying attention. I just jotted down something because you gave me an idea for another episode, which is going to be called Scripted Blackness. Okay,
Oh, I like that.
we'll talk about
Good.
that. We'll definitely talk about that.
Good.
Cool.
I'll wait for my check.
All right. Yeah. So that was a different experience, and actually, so when I got married, my wife and I, Fabi, we attended that church, and it's true that it was, for me, it was an eye opener because it was the most culturally diverse church I had ever been to, coming from where I was initially. And the pastor was, we talked last week a little bit about the concept of having kind of a roadway towards leadership within the church, right? And that pastor was such a phenomenal dude because he would literally just pull you aside. If look, you could not have the least bit of a musical inclination in you. This guy
Yeah.
was putting you on a piano to play on a Sunday at church.
Yeah.
Like that's the type of guy he was. He was a trial by fire type of person.
Oh yeah.
But the good thing about it is that you saw that within the church still there were a lot of people in different positions, and strangely enough, there wasn't tension. There wasn't like a feeling of divide as we saw in the church I attended before that.
Hmm.
And I think that's maybe a similar experience to kind of how things are structured at your church a little bit, Randy, in the sense that it's more inclusive, more diverse, and I think there's less divide.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. In terms of me experiencing downplaying my Blackness, similar to what Lori was saying, I think maybe in the last few years was really me actually discovering my Blackness and what that means. Because growing up, not that I didn't identify with being Black, but I am Black. So I didn't know about downplaying or whatever. I didn't have that concept, and it wasn't something that came to mind in our fellowship meetings. So I didn't really have that concept. And at in our ministry, I'd say in comparison, and I don't like to compare, but just so you get an idea, in comparison to some other biblical organizations or churches, our ministry is a little bit, you could say, like Bible nerds, where it's a lot of like geeking out on the actual scripture and getting into like, the Greek a little bit and that sort of stuff. So in the actual environment, it wasn't really, are you born here? Are you from somewhere else? We're just so focused on the word being taught that in some instances, not that it was irrelevant, but it wasn't really what was focused on. When you were in those fellowship meetings, we're getting into the scriptures. Maybe some other events was where like maybe your specific cultures or your identity would shine. But for the most part, I didn't feel like I need to downplay my Blackness in those environments.
Yeah, I get you. Cool.
I think it's safe to say, that, all of us here, especially, we don't really fit a stereotype,
Yeah.
But not that our Blackness is quote unquote supposed to fit any stereotype. So I want to be sure that I word that carefully. But what I do mean to say is that there are ways that we've downplayed it without even realizing it. Every time our parents told us, make sure you wear your hair this way so that you don't, draw this kind of attention to yourself, or make sure you don't, and do or wear your clothes this way or that way. these are the ways that, without even realizing it, we were just not allowed to be ourselves. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
You know, which is, it's kind of like, it's kind of heartbreaking because we've downplayed it in ways without even realizing it. You know,
That's it.
and it's only like, hey, wait a second. I should be allowed to wear my hair however the heck I want to wear it. You know what I mean? That's when you begin to realize, oh shoot, I have been downplaying it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
I know a piano player, a keyboard player, phenomenal keyboard player, um, and he's had challenges because he wears his hair in dreads, and he's been told that he's not allowed to, and this is both in black environments and in white environments that he's been
Yep.
told, like,
yep.
that hairstyle is unkept, and it's this grooming that we've been through as black people that we see so often, where for some reason what we do is unacceptable, and it's like, I remember when we used to go to those youth conventions and youth camps out in Ontario, all the white kids used to have dreads. You know what I mean? And it was just like, okay, fine.
Wow.
You know what I mean? But we would get reprimanded, and it's just like,
Exactly.
even in Texas. Earlier today, I was just reading a thing where a principal in Texas has told honor students that if they want to walk across the stage and collect their diploma, they must remove braided hair.
Wow.
They cannot have braided hair. This is 2020 we're talking about, and this type of racism exists in school settings, and it exists in the church, and it's damaging, and that's why there's this fighting, there's this anger, because it's bottled up. It's these microaggressions that you deal with, and people like to discredit the idea or the concept of a microaggression, but the truth of the matter is that these things are not necessary. This type of behavior towards us is not necessary. Like, even the company I work for just issued a statement, and it was a little bit of a guide explaining, like, what it is, how to what you say, and how it could be perceived, and why it's not a good idea to say it. And one of the things that has come up is something we've all heard before: is you speak so eloquently for a black person, or you speak so eloquently for an immigrant, and it's like, you don't understand how damaging that is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And last little point I'm going to make, we talked a little, so on that topic of the idea of tokenizing, I remember when we were at said church that Dwight Gift and I went to before, they had a missionary who came, and he was going, his mission was this: he would go to Barbados, okay. Teach literature to the children in Barbados, okay. Now,
He was white?
Yeah, a white dude, okay. Now, I never watched my mom come home from church so angry because Barbados is one of the Caribbean islands with, like, the highest rate of literacy, okay.
Wow.
And it has schools that are so good that doctors from England, parents from England, send their kids to schools there to learn, and stuff like that. So it's like, how is this guy coming to Barbados, to teach literacy? My mom, especially, and on top of that, my mom was gearing up to become an English teacher in Barbados. So, like, she knew the culture, she knew what happened there. Young kids reading advanced books and stuff like that, and Shakespeare and all this stuff as little children.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Before you go ahead.
No, I'm saying, like, it's funny that you mentioned that, Terry, with regards to, like, some of, like, the work that missionaries do, because my mom, like, a similar experience, but it was tied to Christianity, where there was a missionary who came to our church, and it's like, well, we went to Zimbabwe, went to South Africa, and they've never heard of Christ before. They've never heard of Christ before, and we've managed to convert X number of men, and now they're followers of Christ. Now they're planting churches. Like, Zimbabwe has a higher rate of Christian folks than Canada alone.
I know.
How can you make a claim that no one has ever heard about Christ in Zimbabwe before, and you've just... And my mom was pissed, man. My mom was upset.
Of course.
My mom was upset. And also, like, painting a picture that everybody lives in poverty in my
Yeah,
country,
Mhm.
right?
that we're savages. We live in poverty.
Yeah, like dude,
Mhm.
I've never grew up in a village before. I was a city boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I never spent a night in a village. you
yeah,
know?
That's
yeah.
The one thing I was going to add was in terms of downplaying. I don't know if this fits in with the what area you're trying to discuss, but one aspect where I do find that I downplay my blackness now, and this is sometimes in the church, but I'd say more generally in everyday life, like with what's going on, what's on the news right now with
Yeah.
black culture and that sort of thing. Evidently, some white people want to learn more, and
Mhm.
obviously, I want to be able to share my experience and to communicate with them.
Mhm.
And even within the church is something that I would love to do. But I started to recognize that when I was speaking to them, I was downplaying my blackness in the sense of I didn't want to. I wanted to I didn't want to offend them and wanted
Mhm.
to offend in a way that makes them comfortable because there's certain respects where I could say I don't want to say, yeah, let me just say like militant black in certain aspects and certain viewpoints, but I didn't want to present myself like that
Right.
to them in case it would offend them or that sort of thing.
Mm.
I don't know if that's something you guys can relate to.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And the worst part about it is when somebody's framing the conversation to try to say like, oh, it's terrible what's happening with Black Lives Matter right now, and it's like,
Mhm.
no, actually, I kind of agree. If you're not in my shoes to understand, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Or they'll throw out the big thing of, oh, they like look at this pillaging and destroying of property, and that's
Yeah.
not the way to get your message across. And it's like, well, hang on, let's look at who's really pillaging. Because, for instance, if you look at the police station in Minnesota, the police station was burnt down by a group of white kids, not by a black man, and guns were stolen by two young white individuals. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that's the thing, is that unfortunately we're being lumped in with everybody who has an agenda. Two police
Yeah.
cars. I read an article. Two police cars were set on fire. It was kind of comical
Hmm.
because the way that they caught the arsonist was because she bought a shirt on Etsy and left a review, and it was a very unique shirt. So
Wow.
when they saw what was written on the shirt, they were able to
Yeah.
trace it back to the Etsy store, and they saw her review that she left, and they went,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So you look at these situations, and you're starting to see that it's unfortunately we're being lumped in with what's going on, and it's not true.
But I'd like to say
Yeah.
though, like even even if it is, black people
Mhm.
destroying and pillaging, the feeling that I've had to kind of come to terms with myself and then find a way to explain to people has been like I don't think anybody who doesn't full on relate to these events, like that when you see people being killed and they are people who look like you and you have been treated badly because of the color of your skin, when you see this happening and when you hear story upon story of people losing their lives and then no justice, nothing happens, there
Yeah.
is a rage. Like
It's
there is
natural.
an outrage. And like while I cannot condone the violence,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I 100% understand where it comes from. Like, I
Yeah.
have all the compassion for someone who's like, I'm burning down this
Yeah.
business. Like, it has nothing to do. It doesn't bring anything. It doesn't bring justice. It doesn't repair anything. It doesn't even really make them feel better. I think it just like inflames everything.
Yeah.
But
It-
can you like that's what I told like my white friends who were like, well, it doesn't do anything. It's just an excuse. And I'm like, can you imagine living with like, your cousin was killed that way, like your grandfather, your father, or your brother, your friend on the other side of the street, a kid, a 12-year-old with a gun, like a toy gun in the park that happened in your neighborhood. And so for
Mhm.
years on end, this happens, nothing happens. We all there's this flare up that happens for like 3 weeks in the media, right? Black Lives
Yeah.
Matter, all of that. And then it dies down until the next one.
mm,
Yes.
And it's been really hard for me to explain. No, it's not that I would go outside and
do
steal
these
and
things.
riot but you need to your outrage needs to be in the right place. Your outrage should be for the people whose lives were lost and not for this reactionary, like, this is pain. It's pain that you're seeing. I get the pain. And
Yeah.
people should be focused on the pain more than the fires. And I understand the business is it's not okay. But I'm saying your attention should not be on that, because that's what makes me think you're not quite okay.
Yeah.
And you cannot tell people how to express their anger, right?
Yeah.
People, we all express anger in different ways. And
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
I look at this and I say, well, since when is a system you're raging against supposed to agree with the way you're raging against
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
It's like, wait a second, no, this is not the terms or the way you're supposed to. I don't get none of that. You know,
No.
I'll put it this
I
way.
was thinking about this recently because I was thinking about, like, a lot of times people say they want a revolution or they're revolutionary until the revolution happens. And they
Right.
see that it's not how they thought it was going to look like on paper, and it's a little bit more ugly than they anticipated. And it's just like, it's easy to say that you're pro these ideas and you're speaking truth to power, whatever slogans you want to say. But then when it actually comes time to put these into action, you might be surprised with how it looks.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I find very, I don't want to say demeaning, but I don't know what the word is, but when these actions are happening, which, like we said, just obviously we don't condone violence. That's like something that's basic level. But when people start to use quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. to tell me how I'm supposed to feel or how I'm supposed to act, without realizing that even though in history we've now painted his actions as the civil rights movement, which is not the civil rights movement, it was the black rights movement.
Yeah.
It's great that black rights fall under civil rights, but it was a black rights movement, and there were people who didn't like Martin Luther King Jr. Evidently, he died at the age of 39. So it wasn't like you guys were fans of him when he was around, but now you're going to use him as like someone to tell me how to act.
Yes.
The reason black rights movement is because it was in conflict with, white. It was black and white, Anyways, I'm off my my soapbox here.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
100%. And that's the thing that we need people to get, and that's what this movement is about. It's about understanding that you cannot tell us to sit down, because when we sit down, we've tried everything. We've kneeled silently in protest. It hasn't worked.
Mhm.
We've run for office. We had a black president. Not we. They had a black president.
Yeah.
Guys just dragged his name through the dirt the whole time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And on top of that, to make matters worse, you put in office a bigot, an outright bigot, after to prove your point. To as a what's his name, Van Lathan. When he said that thing, this is a white lash, and he got so much trouble for that, that's exactly what this turned out to be. It was the reply to, we're not happy with the fact that you put, a black man in power. And it scared the United States that he was actually such a good person. And when they looked for dirt on him, they could not find dirt on him. So what? He smoked a little bit of weed in college. I mean, look. President, look at Clinton. That's all I have to say. Okay, you're still digging up dirt on Clinton. You know what I mean? And it's like, come on, Anyways, I don't want to get into what the current leader in chief is involved in, but I mean, it doesn't take long. Just do a few Google searches and you'll see some of the thing. I mean, 22 accusers. Come on, Anyways. Allegedly. Let's say allegedly. All right. So, hey, I've been holding out on this video that I wanted to show you guys. Okay. It's along the lines of our topic. I'm so excited.
About this.
So excited about this. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen. Bear with me, just because I checked the audio beforehand, so the audio will play. Okay.
Okay.
Just give me a second. I'm gonna bring it up here. Okay, and I'm just gonna make it full screen.
I like it already. I like what he's wearing.
Oh yeah.
The Lord says
You guys
in
hear?
2020, listen to this phrase, oil will be tested. We will find out who is who. In other words, there will be a great division in the body of Christ. Those who are truly with the Lord will stand out, and those who have been playing with the Lord will be revealed. That which can be shaken will be shaken, but that which remains will prosper and rise up. This is a time of mergers, alliances, submission. You must have strong alliances, connections for the war that is to come. It's a spiritual war. There's a great divide coming in the church. Politics and race will play a major role in this divide. Blacks are about to leave churches that have white leadership, that show no empathy or concern for their plight. A lot of African Americans have left African American churches and submitted to white leadership, and it's been all right. But a lot of these white leaders are, y'all ready for this? Undercover racists. Tell you what I hear. And politics have been revealing their hearts. The Lord says this. Now listen to what I'm about to say to y'all. Y'all know when I say it, it's coming to pass. You might as well mark it. An alarming amount of whites are about to join black churches. Eyes will be open. The days of, listen to this, the gospel being preached around prosperity are over. Celebrity preachers will fade and never return. Significant, relevant, and popular voices will rise up, but God will not allow celebrities to run the body of Christ in the form of preachers anymore. God says thousands of people will attend church again. However, this time the focus will not be the facility, nor will it be the senior leaders. God will rule his house through his people. People will find great significance in church fellowship.
Yeah, so that's a pastor by the name of, he goes by the name YPJ, okay? And he preached this at watch service, which is traditionally in black churches in the United States. Watch service is the night of December 31st, okay? And it's to bring in the New Year's. And I learned something really actually interesting about that historically this week, which is that the reason why watch night service is such a big thing in black churches is because when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, it was signed and to come into effect on January 1st. So everybody gathered in the churches, right? Because that was the only place that would allow groups of black people to gather together under the Jim Crow laws and actually congregate and celebrate spending the night together when the Emancipation Proclamation came into effect. When I heard that word, when I heard that prophecy, I was just like, look at what God had to say to his church. And when you look at where we are today, 6 months into this year, okay, look at what the climate is, look at what the tone is. I don't think that there's anything. If you want to talk about a person who is directly receiving words from God, I think this pastor is. Yeah. You know, what are your thoughts on the video, guys?
Ooh. You almost gave me a heart attack, man. I was not ready for this.
Yeah, get that.
Yeah.
I think, like you said, a lot of the things that were mentioned in that, we can see it playing out today. The thing that got me that was pretty funny though was about did you say like some white pastors will be revealed as racist or something?
Undercover racist.
Undercover racist.
Undercover racist. That is so funny because I've had a similar thought, not in terms of like specifically to pastors, but just like people in my social circle. Once this happened, I was like, oh, so this is what you think of black people. All right. You know, some people like really reveal themselves knowingly or not. And yeah, people are allowed to have their opinion, but I'm allowed to be able to make an assessment from what I hear you're saying, you know?
Yes.
Yep.
That's the Lord have mercy. It's the only way this could be more accurate is if he used the word, you know, not just pastors, but your congregations, you know.
Yeah.
The oh man, like this is like the invisible thing we've been battling against in churches for the last I don't know how long, you know. I've been around a minute now. You know, I've grown up in it. I've experienced it. I've lived it, and it was always the invisible thing that you can't quite put your hands on it, but it was there. It was happening. You know,
Mhm.
and you know, like now there's this. I've seen these other videos, kind of like like the counter argument, saying, "Oh, you know, like it was such an ignorant video. It was a video showing I think Lil Wayne. He was being interviewed by somebody from CNN or something, and he's literally saying, "Oh, you know, it's white kids that buy my music, so racism doesn't exist."
Oh.
Wow.
I just want to scream, and I just want to take it. I just want to,
Oh no.
you know, you just want to take your tablet, just throw it, you know, like come on,
Yeah.
you know, and now there's like this whole thing where we gotta figure out what the exact precise um, scoop of racism is in the church in order for people to acknowledge it. You know,
Mhm.
they don't want to be defined as the Jim Crow guys, right? So we can't say that racism just looks like that, right? So you have to explain what it is. Well, think of it this way: if 80% of your congregation is black, yet none of the music caters to them, right? Or none of the none of the
None of
preaching,
the leadership.
Bro, it's
none of
like
the
representative.
right, none of the leadership represents them, right?
Mhm.
None of what you do on a Sunday, other than you know the march on the flag march once a year, you know, represents them,
Yeah.
right? That should allow you to begin to assess, hey man, maybe we're not included. You know, maybe
Yeah.
there is something wrong with this picture, right? It should help you
Mhm.
be able to start to discern that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I
It's,
agree.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think like in times like we're living now, it reminds me. I had this conversation with a friend last week who is white, and we were discussing, this whole world, I guess. And so she goes to a church where most people are black. However, the pastor is white. And she was having trouble with the the leadership silence over the last few weeks. She was like,
mm,
this is us. This is the church right now, and we are the people who are suffering, who are mourning, who are grieving, who are angry these days. You're saying nothing. It's like Sunday, as if this was not 2020 and the world wasn't going down in flames. So she was like, what are you doing, right? So she wrote him an email, and she was like, I'm just I'm concerned, and I'm like, maybe you're like working on something. I'd like to know what's going on. And his answer was actually quite defensive from what she told me. I wasn't there. But what he said was like, this is not the type of thing we do. We're not political. That was the sentence. We're not political here. Like, we come here to share the gospel. And she got really upset. And in turn, I got very upset because I was like, if this is not a time where you feel like the church needs to speak up, I am so sorry, but I'm going to say it. Your church is irrelevant. Like, this is not, Jesus was not ignoring what was happening in his time where he was. No, he got angry. He got upset when he saw injustice. He spoke up. And not only he spoke up, he acted in favor of the person who was subject to the injustice. So, no, you can't tell me this. This is not about politics. This is not about who you vote for. It has nothing to do with it. Nothing. Plus, this is Montreal. Like, we're not talking Trump. We're not talking. No, we're talking about Black people here who are trying to figure out, what are we supposed to do about this? We feel this in our bones in the same
Mhm.
way that the Americans do. And I hate for people to tell me, oh, you're not in the US. It's, hey, where do I see people who look like me?
yeah.
Mhm.
Let's
Yeah.
be real, right? These are the same people. You cannot tell me this is not me. I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my heart when I see these people being literally murdered. This is part of me. I understand this is how the world devalues my life. It's the same.
Mm.
It's not, there's no, la frontière is over there. So then, No, that's not how it is. And so to have a pastor or several pastors be unwilling to say anything because politics, and let's be real, because donations and because of all of the ties that come with needing money to survive. I just think it's so unacceptable. And as a white pastor of a black church, dude.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say something real quick. I was calling timeout because I wanted to make sure I got a chance to say this. You want to say that it's not, that your church is not political. Okay. So when they were passing laws, okay, that would oblige churches to actually perform marriages for gay people, weren't the pastors saying we should vote against this type of leadership in our country? If you want to say that it's not political, okay, when they're passing laws, okay, for abortion clinics and all this stuff and making abortions a little bit easier for people, and stuff like that, is the church not saying be careful the type of leadership you put in office? The church is so two-faced and so full of garbage. So full of garbage because they're political when it's in their favor. Okay, I really held myself back.
Tell me how you really feel, Terry.
Look, man, and I've seen this nonsense, man, happen so many times where it's like we're standing up, the here in Quebec, what you hear in a lot of churches when it comes to election time is they start talking about how bad the Liberal government is and blah blah blah, and how they're going to pass laws that are right. And it's like, listen, man, I thought you guys weren't political. Why are you telling us? Why are you trying to convince us? Not tell us outright who to vote for, but tell us what to vote against.
Kind of tell us, yeah.
See, Randy, cut it out with that bull, man.
See, Randy, because you at the quote unquote black church, you don't hear this whole other side, right? Yeah. So,
or you may be less exposed to it. Let's not say you don't hear. You're probably
but this is what's going on the flips, on the other side. It's most of the conversation. You know what I mean?
That is wild. Wow.
You're in a church. You're not being pastored. Oh, some of the, like, to go back and echo Lori's point to tag it into this is some. I wish some of the churches stayed silent, because some of them, their first responses was, Terry, how would Jesus respond to this pain, right? So a lot of them were preaching at the people in pain, right, rather than in pain on their behavior, rather than than addressing the injustice to those people, right? So their stances were, when this happened to Jesus, Jesus, he went into the wilderness or whatever, like just just be passive like Jesus was, this is the I wish they stayed quiet then.
I agree with that. Go ahead, Jeff.
My thing, just to add on what Lori was saying about how troubling and how deafening the silence was of that church with the white pastor. I think also, even on the flip side, when the church delayed to address the issue, that's also deafening, right? It's like, are you addressing the issue now because it's in your best interest to, so that you're not perceived as a racist? Right? Where were you the first 3 weeks when I was in pain, crying, and hoping that my community would support me, right? It's like, oh, now you're doing it because it is part of popular vote. Right?
You waited for Amazon and Starbucks to turn around
exactly
and have a banner.
Don't even get me started on Starbucks, man. Sorry.
And my question to the church at large is what are we doing to feed people, to pour on people while they are going through this difficult time, right? We're called to feed the poor. Right now, we have people who are struggling. What are we doing practically to help communities, Black communities, indigenous communities that are hurting right now, financially, and also even just like acts of service.
Mm-hmm.
Well, gift. You know, if they're not tithing, it's hard for us to consider helping. Sorry,
But bro,
that's my point. That's
Wow.
how
okay,
That's it, right?
Why-
I thought the tithes were supposed to be in the storehouse, right? And and that during these times now, the church is supposed to come out like the we got this,
No,
right?
wait, you misunderstood the scripture. You misunderstood the scripture. The scripture says it's for when you want to go to the store and then bring the stuff back to your house.
Oh,
I'm playing.
honestly,
Go ahead, Gift. What you got on your heart? You're jumping
why
up and down.
why are we sending monies to Africa and Asia, and we
Mhm.
are not sending monies to our Black and indigenous communities
Here.
here,
Because
right here?
you know why? Because when you're sending the money to Africa, you're not sending it to an African. You're sending it to the. You're sending it to right the white pastor that is in charge of
A Land
Africans.
Cruiser.
That's it.
Yep.
Homeboy needs a Range Rover to be able to drive on the roads.
That's it.
Hey man, it's dirt roads. It's dirt roads. There's no highways.
Exactly. Exactly.
The
That's why you
Honda
need the
Civic
Range Rover.
won't do.
That's right. That's right.
You need that 4-wheel drive.
Exactly. You know, and all those lions are gonna go get you and stuff.
So I'll share a moment where I almost threw up in my mouth, and this it reminded me of what I've heard a lot in church, but this actually happened while I was at work one day. So I had somebody who went to Africa, and they were talking about how when they went, they were staying on a compound, and at this compound, you have a lot of black workers that are working and stuff like that, and then you have like they're taking care of this gated community that a lot of the white people live in. And this person said, it's a shame that we give white people such a hard time, because I mean, like, if you look at what's happening there, I mean, it's really good for like the black people there. They wouldn't have had this opportunity. It's like, listen, so
Who stole our riches? Sorry.
exactly. Okay, my mother-in-law, Lori, you may remember this. My mother-in-law went to Africa a few years ago. Okay, and she was with a group of pastors that were working at some churches, and these were all black and African pastors. Okay, and she was saying how she was told that over there, the way that it works is that there are rules that you can't dig deeper in some areas than 6 feet. Okay, because the potential for hitting gold, for hitting all kinds of minerals, precious gems, and all this stuff. Okay. So like, and companies, big corporations have the rights to these things, so they've been able to get laws in their favor that you can't dig below a certain amount if you want to build a house, let's say, and you want to do your foundations or something like that. Can you imagine that you live on your own land, and you are told what you can do and what you can't do with your own land? The only place that exists is in Africa. You know what I mean? Here, the only reason why we have these types of rules is because you probably have a gas main running behind your house, and if you try to dig too deep, you're gonna blow up the whole neighborhood, right? But I mean, there, it's like no, because they don't want people to be able to progress. They don't. Africa is such a rich country, such a rich continent. Sorry, and it's just sad. It's so sad to see how we're treated. How our people are treated in their own land.
Yeah. To what Lori was mentioning with her friend there, the verse that immediately came to mind, it was in Romans, where it talks about rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. So it, like, I don't think you need to have like a whole sermon on the topic, especially if you're a white person. You don't know. You probably don't know. You probably don't have the words. You don't have the experience. But I think the thing that most people are just asking for is for you to understand that there's something going on right now with people in this church, in this community. They're feeling certain feelings. Maybe you don't have the words to describe what they're going through, but recognize that this is something that's happening. It can be something as short as that. It doesn't need to be like making a whole sermon. And then also on the other hand, though, I don't know like just to, you know, push back on some of the ideas here. I don't know if they're obligated to say something. If you're consistent with being apolitical, then I think you just need to be consistent all the way through. So if
Yes.
you actually stick by that, then you have to be like Terry mentioned. You can't start talking when it's election time and that sort of thing. So if you're going to have that stance, I respect that stance, but keep that consistent throughout.
I agree.
And then the other thing was, I think like if you are going to say something, I will respect them taking their time to say something correctly. I don't want them hurried up there saying something and completely like insult people or is not the right thing to say. So I don't think you want to have to respond immediately. I do respect them taking some time to think through. And yeah, so those are the only things that I can think of why a church might not say something or say something not immediately. Either they're thinking it through to say something correctly, or if you're really going to stick by the apolitical thing. Like if you're not going to say something now, I don't want to hear you say something during election time or that other time of year.
Yeah, because a lot of what you're seeing right now is you're seeing all of these bills trying to get passed, right, in the United States, and it's a question of pandering, you know. So they're now all of a sudden the same people that were so against police reform are trying to pass bills on, you know, on police reform, and these are a lot of in the United States there are a lot of conservative and Republican, uh, you know, minded people, you know. So
Yeah.
you look at these things and it's a question of pandering, and that's the difficult thing, is that, you know, you hope that if a church speaks out, let's say, on what's happening in culturally right now at this time, you're hoping that they're going to be true to what they're saying, you know what I mean, and that will be a reflection, and it's not that it's just the right time to say it, but really that they actually do care, that, you know, yes, we hear the pain that's existing in the Black community, and we want to try to help the Black community. We want to now come to the aid of the Black community, because unfortunately they've kept us out too long. They forced us out of a lot of discussions, and they've cherry picked the things that they like about us. You know, they cherry pick our music that they like. They cherry pick our talent when needed, and when they need a good wholesome word, you know. And it's like the same reason why everybody knows Sister Act, right? Because it's like, oh, choir music, you know. And every time I tell people, white people that I know, that like I played in a church choir, and did you guys do Oh Happy Day? Oh my gosh, you guys must have done Oh Happy Day. And it's like, there's more to it than that. You know what I mean? I just want to take a quick second. I just want to acknowledge a few people that have reached out to us. So Gary Henry's been paying attention to our conversation. Thank you so much for listening to us, Gary. And then our buddy Joey, who was with us last week. Thanks for joining us.
Oh
yeah. Yes. So we just continued the conversation that Joey was a part of last week, where he shared about, you know, his experience as having grown up for a part of his life in church, and now as somebody who no longer attends, and you know, somebody who we have a tremendous amount of respect for. You know, he's a homie. So thanks for joining us, Joey, tonight.
Can I just add something that's kind of like vaguely related, but I was thinking about it while we were talking. Kind of relate to the undercover racist aspect.
Yeah.
Where I've realized recently there's been moments in my life that I feel very uncomfortable when a white person, it tends to be like older white people who they talk to me about Black people as if like they like me, but they don't realize they're like insulting everyone that looks like me. You know, they're having this conversation where they're talking about Black people, and I don't know what's going on in their head, but they're talking about, like, they don't realize that they're talking about my people, but it's kind of this insulting.
You're not like the rest of them.
But Randy, you're not like them, bro.
Yeah, that whole dynamic. And it really got my heart recently about like trying to not be the type of Black person that they feel comfortable doing that with. You know, like, not that I'm trying to put myself, that was something that I did that allowed them to feel like they can speak freely like that. But like just being able to claim my own blackness, like we're discussing, and being able to still present myself in a way where, like, you just know that that's not going to fly with me, you know?
Exactly.
Joey just brought something up. Yeah.
Yeah. Joey says my accent makes a lot of white people think that it's okay to do that. So, yo, I got a wild story for you guys. Wild story. When I attended the other church, there was a bass player there. Okay, who he also is very white sounding. Okay, but he's a fair skinned black dude. Okay, so my man is telling me one day he used to work for a computer. Sorry.
That's white people's favorite.
Yeah, that's it. So my man was working in computer sales, tech sales, right? And one day he gets a call up from this guy with like a southern twang in his way of speaking, and he's like, I like you. I want to have you come down here, and I'm going to take you around and show you to a few of my friends, and you're a good guy. And in fact, I have a meeting I'd like to invite you to, right? And literally, my man was saying he would like to invite him to a clan meeting. Okay. But they had never. This is before the time of video conferencing and all this stuff. It was just phone sales. My man had no idea that this guy was black that he was talking to on the phone. So I'm like, well, what did you do? Did you cancel the sale? He's like, listen, he was my biggest client, so I just siphoned this guy for all of his money. I sold him a bunch of stuff. He didn't.
Wow.
And that's the thing, sometimes being white sounding really helps, in a sense.
Yeah.
But it's crazy that that's something we have to think of, like the idea of code switching.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now I'm in a professional setting, so I got to watch how I cut my hair, and like even myself, like I tend to wear my hair in a mohawk from time to time, and it's like I get my colleagues like, what you do to your hair? Your hair so it's like, listen, every time y'all cut your hair, I don't have something to say, like, why do you guys have to be so observant of me when or if I wear a shirt that's flashier than normal? It's a big deal.
I got the like, you look ethnic today, which it was just like a different shirt, I guess, than what I wear. And I'm like, ethnic, as in, please explain yourself. I look more black than usual. Like, what are you talking about?
Hey, Joy. Oh man. Yo, for real.
Guys, like speaking about like how we have to like alter our self or our blackness. Like, I remember with my first job, like I was getting ready on Monday, and like my mom's like, make sure that you get a haircut that's just clean, short, outline, no designs. You guys, like Terry and Dwight, you guys know me. I've had all sorts of styles over the years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't understand why. It's just like, like you won't be taken seriously if you start looking funny. You won't be taken seriously at all. And dude, like I've been careful like ever since. I mean, like once in a while, I go rogue here and there, but it's like even the way I dress, the way I go to certain meetings, like I very much pay attention to that, and it's something that's I don't think about much anymore, which is sad. It just happens automatically. Where like if I'm going to a certain place, I gotta look like this. I can't have this sort of hairstyle. I can't talk like I can't. Yeah.
And oh man, my experience was I was working at this place a couple years ago, and this dude was French Canadian and not low key about his racist at all. Okay, I mean, my man was out and proud. He felt like he was doing everybody favors. He was very happy to let everybody know that he was doing them favors. So. I have sensitive skin on my face and stuff. So if I decide to go to the barber, it's really because I'm prepared to deal with the fact that my face is going to irritate me for a few weeks and blah 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 blah. So, anyways, I went to the barber because we had some sort of I was getting married. So I was started at the barber, cleaned up myself.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, I remember now that it was that. So I was getting married, did the whole thing, shaved up, got the barber to get me looking good, and I went to work. And my man's comes up to me, and everybody in the office was like, "Whoa, Dwight, man, you looking good?" Da, 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 Normal. It was a small place, about 12 of us. No big deal. My man's comes up to me. He says, "Hey, you don't usually cut your hair this way. This is a very intimidating look,
Oh!
This is very intimidating. I don't think you should do it again."
What?
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, again?
I'm for real, bro. I'm for real.
Yo, he did you a favor. Like, you needed to hear it, right? Oh my god.
Wow, dude.
Okay. This is who I
I've
had to
never
work with.
heard it so upfront. I feel like I have received so much advice about how I need to do my hair, and I know like a lot of it is trying to be helpful and really not racist. And like, oh, like I think it took me like a good 2 years to wear my natural hair. To wear my natural hair at work, to just wear, like my little fro and whatever. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's so cute. Oh, your hair is so curly. And you have to kind of brace yourself for that in the morning. But then like you should never get braids, or like, when are you getting your hair done? And I'm just like, why is like, why do I tell you how to do your hair? Do I tell you how to tie your ponytail? No. Like, if you want to say, oh, I like the change, it's good enough, right? Like, I don't need the advice. Like, also, I don't need to be like comforted in my blackness, but like, you shouldn't be afraid of wearing your hair like, by white people, right? Don't be afraid of wear. I'm like, I will wear my hair how I want to wear it. End of story. Like, if I didn't feel like having my hair, in a fro, well, I didn't. End of story. Like, the braids are fine, and also the natural hair is fine. Terry, your daughters are here like wrecking havoc.
Yeah, I know. So we're gonna come and get them after the podcast. Yeah. Okay, watch. I have another one, and Dwight, you didn't mention this. So I was expecting you to go this route with it. So now you're at work, right? And it's lunchtime, and you bring a dish that's not standard white accepted food. Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm just gonna mute Lori for a quick second. Okay, so you go ahead. Okay, you bring your food and you heat it up. Okay, and then you have one of two things happen. So either somebody who's not accustomed to a smell of a spice that they probably haven't used before, or will say something, right? We'll have a comment to make, or you get this. You get what's that? Oh, smells good. No, it's like, yo, what possesses you guys to do this to people? Oh my god!
If we did that,
Yo,
It's like, listen. I don't comment when you bring your mashed potatoes and Salisbury steak. Like, leave me, man. Just leave me my food.
for real. Yo,
Oh, that's so funny.
my ex-boss, he figured out how to do away with this whole mess. Okay. In the interview.
I almost spat out my water.
This guy goes to me. This guy goes to me, man. Yo, he's like, we're a group of 12 or whatever, and I I do a good mix to try and keep it diverse here, and and you're another diverse hire, and I got a lot of respect for you. I like you off the bat, and you sound like the kind of person that keeps it real, and I'm like, cool, He's like, so, in the name of diversity, there's no microwave here.
So my company, yeah, that's hilarious. In the name of diversity, there's no yo.
There's no microwave.
Wow.
Oh, that's so
Yo, my first day on the job, right? I come in and I got me some. I got some rice and beans, and I'm looking to, like this is a big old, building, like there's gotta. I'm thinking there's no microwave in this little office, but this is a huge 3-story building, So lunchtime comes around. I said, okay, where do you guys go to heat up your food? I said, I know. He said there's no microwave here. He said, the guy goes, what? No, man. There's no place in this whole building to heat up your food. He's like, we've been eating cold sandwiches for the last 12 years.
Oh my god.
Stop playing. I'm not playing. Okay? This is how this was resolved, man. Okay? My man just he was racist, but he wasn't.
The name of diversity.
He wasn't shy about it, right? Mm-hmm.
But you know what?
Mind
Oh yeah, man. My man had his solutions in place.
Dude, you should have brought your thermos, man. Hot.
Yo, bro.
Though, from the moment he said you're a diverse hire, like I would have had one of my eyebrows being, I'm a what?
Yeah, as soon as he said that to me, man, Laura, I wasn't even playing. I was like, man, I got my hand is floating over the eject button. So I'm ready to hit this button as soon as and sure enough, that's exactly why I ended up having to leave there, because fast forward a year, almost 2 years now, and we had a client, and the idea was that we would work remotely and go and service. I was a technical support guy. I'd remote into clients' stations and remotely work on their stations, which was 95% of the job, And it wasn't. This was an old school company. I mean, this is old school tech. Everything in there is from the 90s, 80s in terms of, in terms of technology, right? And so this was, just the technology wasn't new. So everything was done old school. So it wasn't secure. Like if you knew the passwords, you could just log in even from your home. There was nothing. So anyways, we had to do this job, but my son was sick. So I told him, hey, listen, I got to work from home because my son is sick. And that's just going to be how it is. So my man's is like, he doesn't talk to me. He doesn't reply to me. He doesn't say no email, nothing. I told his son was working there, and I told my boss what I was going to do. So I worked from home, and there was no security, nothing in terms of like, even like a VPN that you need to log into to go to work. We were using TeamViewer and to remote into customer stations. So there was no issue in terms of being able to work from home. In fact, I did a full client installation and got them from zero to up and running, and their whole systems tested, front to back. By the end of the day, everything was good. Customer left a stellar review, right? It was a regular day on the job. I get to work the next day. My immediate boss and this other dude are like, yo, man, homeboy lost his mind yesterday, So he calls me into his office at the end of the day, and he starts talking to me about how this sort of thing can't happen anymore. That I can't, like, there's no such thing as a company that's going to let you work from home. What do you think that, what do you think this is? And so on and so forth. And that he's like, besides, isn't there some church that you refugees can take your kids to or something?
My man was next level racist, man.
Yeah, it was like
For real. Okay. My man said this to my to my like this, you know. So it was just like, no, we gotta we gotta deal with this. So the next day I had a conversation. I had a conversation with the wifey, and we decided to move on. And that was just going to be the end of that. We didn't care about figure this out or do this when you got a job lined up. We were like, now this is not the environment to be in.
Mm-hmm.
We just made moves. Lo and behold, though, the funny thing is that people's from there that were there 10 and 12 years followed me to the new company that I'm at because they were like, we need to get out, So it ended up being for the best in the end. But, I worked under that, and I don't wish that under anybody because that was the governing force of the office the entire time I was there. And nobody will know what it's like to work on that, under that, until you're faced with it.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a wild. It's good that like you're able to look back at it now and be out of that environment.
Yeah.
But that was a wild thing to experience. When you told me that story about the microwave, I laughed my head off. But then when you told me the rest of how this guy was, I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's craziness.
If the microwave story was the height of it, it made for a little funny joke, like
Yeah.
you stay in your lane, you leave him in his lane, and we're cool, man. I'm just working for a paycheck. At the end of the day, I want to go home to my family. That's cool,
Mhm.
I don't need him to. I don't need to convert him,
Mm.
But then when he crossed these lines, that's when it got
Enough is enough. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that's for me, one of the crazy experiences I had, man, was I was working in a company. Well, it's actually where I still work, but
Terry, how public is this live feed? Outside, bro.
I think I'm gonna shut up right
Give your colleagues on your Facebook.
This is not a story that they haven't heard, but you know what? I think I'm gonna hold it for now. But
Okay.
it's rough when you work in an environment where racist behavior. Actually, no, I'll talk about this. I'm gonna go for it. So you talked about how the church is trying to tell people how to tell people. Dwight, I think you mentioned it. How the church was trying to tell people how to behave when they're hurt, rather than correcting the behavior that's hurtful.
Yeah.
So my experience was that I was working, and there's this person who was ranked more senior, and also, let's say, at a different echelon than I am. I'm a draftsman. He's an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And his way of doing things is, he'd walk by my desk and throw a sketch on my desk and walk away. And I looked, I got up and I'm looking, and he's handing out sketches to other people, and he's stopping and making small talk and being jovial with people, and as jovial as he could be, because he was still an A type personality, or AH type personality. But for me, it was just the pitch it on my desk and walk away. So I went to somebody one day, and I said, look, I don't see him behave this way with other people. But he behaves this way with me, and I don't think it's right, And the person's answer to me was, well, he's Eastern European, and over there it's a different structure than here, and that's how it is. And there's this hierarchy that exists, and you just gotta understand that that's how it is. And he's that way. You can't change him. He's just gonna be like that. But he doesn't mean anything by it. And I go, okay. If my culture was to punch somebody in the face every time they did that, would you accept that? And the guy's answer was, no, of course not. I'm like, so then I don't have to accept what you're telling me, that his behavior is correct. And, I look at that now, and it's so funny because, you talk about all this diversity and inclusion stuff, and like, you know, we're going to talk about this in a few weeks about the marketability of this stuff, okay? But you look at a situation like this and you see that now that it's what everybody's talking about, it's what's on everybody's mind is racial diversity, you know, and all kinds of whatever banner that diversity stuff falls under. Now all of a sudden these topics are happening and that behavior is no longer acceptable. But when I said it 10 years ago, I was told to just kind of shut up and deal with it.
Right.
You know?
That brings up two things that I've been thinking about recently. The first being, I guess it relates to the conversation as a whole, in terms of how do you explain to someone who's not Black the experiences of some of this, whether it's a microaggression or different forms of racism. And because I did have someone who's close to me, you know, ask me overtly, like, hey, like, in your life, have you ever experienced overt racism? And I had to think about it. And to be quite frank with you, in terms of like someone being blatant or like overt racist, I'm fortunate enough to say I haven't really experienced that. Doesn't mean that doesn't happen for other people, but it just made me think, because I have experienced racism, but it wasn't blatant or overt. I think a lot of times with, in particular, white people, some white people want you to be able to give them a perfect, this was racist, was clearly because you were Black, whereas usually more, it's sometimes even a feeling, like even with you, with that thing where you notice he's treating me this way. Is he treating me because I'm Black, or does he do this with other people? You're always in this constant state of, you know, either, oh, this is a isolated event, or type of thing. But when you live in a Black body, sometimes when it starts to build a pattern. So you start to see these things happening, so we can recognize, oh, that person did that, and that's racist, because you know the accumulation of small things that leads up to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
I think the clearest example I can give is, like, once I became a teenager, I realized I had this superpower where I can, wherever I am, I can make people's car doors automatically lock as I walk by them. That sort of thing. Like that event, I can't like say definitively, oh, they locked the door because Randy's Black and that's what made it do it. But when I see it happen so many times, you connect the dots. And I remember the first time it happened that really like had an impact on me was when I was visiting in the US, and I must have been like maybe 16, 17 years old, and I was wearing a hoodie. I was wearing a Duke University hoodie, and I was in a hotel just going for a walk. And then when I came back to the hotel, there was someone whose car was parked in front of the hotel, like an older white gentleman. And as I start to go up to the hotel, his door, I heard the loud click of his door lock.
Yeah.
And it just took me by surprise. And I was just like, in my mind, in that moment, the thoughts that were running through was like, my immediate thought was like, oh, it's because I'm Black. But then the next thought is like, it could just be because I'm a young teenager. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And then I went to like, oh, it's maybe because I'm wearing a hoodie. It makes me look a little like intimidating, yada, yada. But then I stopped myself and I realized that my initial reaction was because of racism. But I've been trained to like give people so many outs. You give them 100 different outs of, oh, not because they're racist, you know? And it kind of like, it surprised that my reaction was like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That goes back to the point we were talking about before. That's us, downplaying our Blackness. You know what I mean? That's the symptom of it. You know, we've been so used to it, we don't realize that that's actually what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you guys. Has your Blackness ever been used as social capital for some white folks that you come across with?
Well, okay. So this is one thing I
just want to flip it. I'm just curious.
So social capital. Okay, give us an example.
Because like you are one of the 2 or 3 black friends, they bring you to parties, family gatherings where you are the only black person.
Uh,
Right? And
yeah.
then they talk about your story, they
Yeah.
talk about your achievement, how good of a black person you are.
Mhm.
And
Oh my god.
yeah,
So you know what I realized? I've been the gateway black boyfriend.
Oh,
so well, Gift and Dwight, you guys know, right?
yeah.
I'm not gonna out the person, but it's happened to me a few times before that girls wanted to get a feeler from their parents as to how they would react, you know. So I was the young church going black guy, you know what I mean, that they would feel comfortable bringing around their parents, you know. And then all of a sudden, you know, for me at the time when I was single, I was just like, oh, I guess I must mean something to this person because I was invited to go somewhere, right? And then like a few weeks later, they'll date like my replica, but just not me.
No!
yeah,
So I was the probe, you know. I was the let's see how my parents would take this. I'm hanging out with the black guy, you know. He's articulate and he's, you know, he's engaging in conversation. And it's funny because one of the first things that my wife told me is she's like, you know, Terry, I noticed that you're able to like have conversations with strangers about, you know, all these like subjects and blah blah blah, you know. And I'm like, you know, and now it's funny. I come to realize it's because I've had to do that. Like I've been put in these awkward situations and positions in my life before, you know.
Oh my God, that's funny in a way.
A black boyfriend.
What about you, Dwight, Lori, and Randy?
I had one similar experience, but for me, I just found it kind of like hilarious. It wasn't really like insulting or anything. Well, it was just that there's this one girl I was talking to a few years ago, and we met on a dating app. And just out of curiosity, I like to, you know, be a little ask weird questions. Gift knows that, but we met on the dating app. I was just curious. I was like, oh, so like, what other? Let's see what the other guys are like that you matched with. What's going on there? You know, I just thought it would be like something funny. And then eventually she obliged, and we were starting to look through, and all the other people she matched with, it was basically like me with a hat, me with dreads. It was just like a different type of black guy, and I just found it so hilarious. And I remember I was watching the movie Get Out a few years later, and it reminded me, you know, like that scene where he opens it up and he sees like different black guys. I laughed so hard.
Oh man.
Oh wow. I can't recall an experience. I it's not really ringing a bell for me. I feel like my experiences where my blackness was, I feel like it's more of a, it's not quite okay, but like where being in a group of white people makes it okay for them sometimes to make some types of jokes or some, you know, some types of things, because since I'm here, you know,
Can't
clearly they're not a group of racists.
Yeah.
But then I'm here and I'm like, that's not quite okay. I don't know how to bring this up because, you know, everyone's all amped up and like going off everybody's joke, and so it just makes you feel impossibly horrible. And well, yeah, for me it was really hard to speak up for myself, and like and I remember coming home from that kind of experience a couple of times and like telling my sister like, oh yeah, I always forget what it's like to be, you know, like really in the middle of a group of white girls, whatever, like group of girls from school that we went from one building to another. We're not necessarily that close, right? But then to hear them talk and like the types of things or the types of jokes that they'll make in my presence, where I'm like, I think they think that it's okay because I'm here. Whereas, you know, if it was just a bunch of white girls talking about black people, like it's very clearly racist.
Yeah.
So I think it's more that, not so much like it's okay because she's here or because she's black. Let's bring her in and show people that black people can be this or that.
Yeah. But one quick one, another one that I remember, because Gift, you mentioned the thing about at parties. I never had that happen where I was like, like a prop at a party. But I grew up in a city where it's like most of my friends were white. It was a predominantly white area. I didn't have too many like black friends. But when I went to certain parties, I remember I'd go to house parties. That was like what we did around like when I was a teenager and that sort of thing. And I remember one time I was at a house party and there's a lot of people there. And then I see another black guy at the party. And immediately my thought was like, another black guy? Like I was thinking like, now I have to, yeah, I was like, I was the black guy at this party. And now this time, I have to have a personality. I can't just be the black guy now. Now I gotta, but it was just funny that I had that thought. It's a joking thought, but it was just like, I'm the black guy at this party.
How do you get personality?
Hold on, can I confess for a second? Randy started working at the same place where we work at about, I think it's a year or two, right? And I was the only black guy, okay? And when Randy showed up, I was like, oh, shoot. This guy, I'm going to lose my cool factor now. Like, Randy's here, I feel you.
Because it's a thing.
That's a funny thing because, like, I feel like my first thought when I'm the only black person in a room and someone else joins, I'm like, yay! And also, this is exposure, because there's a number of things that as a black person are not cool, but white people think it's cool. Like I've had really bad hair days that I was like, I'll make it work. And then another black girl comes in and I'm like, shoot. Because all the white people are like, oh no, it's so cute. And I'm like, I know it's not. My hair is not done. And the black girl is like, I see you.
Some lotion on your legs or something. You look nasty.
Ashy legs, yeah.
For me, you know what it is? I feel that way a little bit sometimes when there's like French African dudes in the environment. Because I find, I aspire to be as suave as like French African dudes. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'm like, oh man, he's so cool. Like he speaks French so eloquently. I speak my English, my Anglophone, French and stuff like that. And it's just like, oh man, I wish I was that cool.
Oh, that's wild.
But that's funny though. But it's funny because sometimes you feel like you got to out-black the other black person in the room,
Yeah. But that's what we're right here is like a Chappelle show stat.
Check this out. My trick, instead of being jealous of Randy, I was like, okay, let me be friends with this guy. We got to talk to him on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's where the whole friendship started.
But you see, that's guys. I was talking like this, acting like it was a myth, but I'm so glad Randy was honest enough to say that because this is something I've witnessed. When you really pay attention, you see black folks, we're so spread out throughout the community that everybody gets their little island of white people. You know what I mean? So they're used to being the only black person in the vicinity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just in charge, bro.
That's it, But then then what happens is some of us become disassociative.
Yeah.
Right? So we then, I first heard of this behavior in eagles, believe it or not. I was at this this little zoo, and this person was saying, oh, when humans feed the eagles, and the problem with having eagles in captivity is you feed them too long, they start to believe that they're humans, and they disassociate themselves from their own, right?
Yeah.
And then I started really witnessing this behavior in our community. Like you would see people black folks that are used to being around white people, all their friends were white growing up, just by the numbers, right?
Yeah.
Just because there's just not enough of us in the community, right? Mm-hmm. So now they adopt the Candace Owens.
Oh,
sorry. Don't mention that name. Please don't mention that name.
So that's where they come from. That's how that's where they come from. They're used to being the only black person in the community, and they don't
We need to
realize.
pray for Candace Owens.
Ooh,
We need to pray for her.
We need to pray
Listen.
for Candace. We need to love on her.
Listen, they say some
Come
things.
back.
Some things go only by prayer and fasting.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to pray and fast for that one.
she can have her own podcast, but like the only thing is like we all know black people who are like more conservative and whatnot. It's actually not that uncommon. But the thing is like I feel like you're being used and being like, oh, if she says it, we can get around to saying it, because she said it, it's okay. That aspect of what she does is kind of yucky to me.
It's very
Yeah.
gross. It's
Yeah.
very gross. Oh, dude.
You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Yo,
telling you.
that is Candace Owens' great grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't have to do that. Oh gosh.
That dude made me want to get up and throw my shoe at the screen. Woo!
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how much time we got left, but I have one last thing to piggyback of something that Terry said about your dating situation when you were dating.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys experienced this, but a close friend of mine who's white actually mentioned this to me. I don't know if you guys can confirm that this happens or not, but he said often with black men, they find that when they're in their 20s and maybe up until their early 30s, they have a lot of success dating white women. They start dating white women and they have a lot of white girlfriends. But then apparently, once it starts getting into the 30s, and some of these white women that they used to be dating are starting to now become serious about starting a family and get married, all of a sudden the black men who are dating a lot of white women have a lot less options all of a sudden, because now the white women are going to marry and actually settle down with white men. Have you heard this or seen this happen?
I've actually seen the opposite happen. So
Wow.
in the sense that I was like I've shared in other podcasts. So like I was dating a white girl, and her mom found out that we were dating. Actually, I'm not surprised about the story that Lori shared about the church she was talking about, because she told me the name of that church, and I know that these people went to that church.
Okay.
So, anyways, but what happened in that circle is that a few of her friends found out that I was dating her, and they were kind of put on guard by the girl's mom to not let her be around me. Now, one of these girls in particular is actually with with a black dude and has a child. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
But she was the watchdog to make sure I didn't date this girl at the time. But it's become what I've noticed is because I guess maybe because I had such a negative experience when I was dating, and this happens sometimes even when I'm out and I see like a young black guy with like a young white girlfriend, I'm like, yo, I almost feel like telling him get out, like you know what I mean, because I'm like, yeah, you don't know the racist attitude or thoughts that the parents may have, I have, and then I'm just like, you know what, things have maybe changed since my time, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's interesting.
It's also the question of, for a lot of people, unfortunately, there's also the experience, right? So for some women, it's a question of the experience of being with a black guy, right? But
Yeah.
they don't necessarily want to settle down and have a long-term life.
Check Joy's comment out.
Yeah. Dating scene in my 30s revealed to me that just about every white woman I dated fetishized, saw as black and exotic about me, and it took me a couple of years to identify how toxic that is. That's true. Yo, blackness is fetishized. There's a podcast I listen to where they talk a lot about about dating relationships and sex and sexuality and stuff like that. And one of the things that the girl says is she's constantly fetishized by white men because she's mixed and he wants to know what it's like to be with a black girl and this and that, and it's just like it's a sad thing.
Yeah.
I'll talk about this from a slightly different perspective, and I'm kind of myself on blast by doing this, but
Yeah.
you know, I came from, I was married before, and I was married to a white woman before, and I'm 10 years removed from that marriage, and the ups and downs that we came through to survive that. Let's just say that God is very good. Um, and then I had the fortunate grace of meeting my now wife, and she's black, and not only is she black, but we're both from Barbados, and we both are here, our uh, you know, first generation Canadian, Bayesian descent, and there is, listen, I realize being in this relationship that racism had been so deeply entrenched in my culture, in my life at the time, that we actually never addressed the anything surrounding our cultures, and I realized that I did not bring any of myself into that relationship. So then I think back to so many experiences, so many things that I did not share, that it's almost like, man, that person actually married a very almost just married the billboard of Dwight.
Yeah.
They did not marry any of they didn't understand, didn't know any of the food, can't tell you anything about me, can't tell you anything about where I'm from, doesn't know the town that I grew up in, doesn't know where the town where my family's from, can't tell you any of that, And so when I woke up to that realization, it was a very sobering thought and conversation I had to have with myself, and pray and really seek God about, because it is real. It is real. I won't say, Randy, that that they won't marry us, because I did get married. I did find somebody that married me, but I will say that just because you are married to somebody doesn't mean that you've resolved the issue of race in your heart.
Interesting.
That was a gem.
Mic drop. Mic drop.
Nice. Yeah, that's good.
Post-COVID, Joey wants to grab a coffee with you, man.
Yeah, man, I have to do that. We're gonna have to do that, Joe. You know that. We're gonna do that.
Yeah. So that's is that the note we're gonna wrap this up on?
I think
I
so.
think that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a great conversation tonight, and I'm really happy that we had a chance to have Randy back, and Joey. Also, thank you for your input last week, and thank you for dropping some knowledge on us again through the comments and stuff. We are going to be putting the podcast on hiatus for a little bit.
Okay.
So just so you guys know, because I'm moving, so next week is actually my moving day, so I'll be in boxes packed to the ceiling. So it's going to be a little bit tough for us, so we're going to take about 2 weeks hiatus, and then Dwight, there's a little bundle of joy that's on the way, so that he's going to be taking some time off too. So we're going to be coming back. We have a few topics and a few ideas already lined up. Thank you again, Lori, for that idea you gave us tonight, and I'll make sure we have you back when we talk about it, scripted blackness. And we just want to thank you guys for watching the podcast. Thank you for your support so far. Please keep sharing our videos. Please keep liking our videos. Please keep commenting. We enjoy your input as viewers, and we look forward to coming back with a little bit of a revamped version of the show in a little bit. So we look forward to seeing you guys in a few weeks.
Yeah,
send
man.
us questions. If you guys have questions or topics you are curious about that we could possibly cover in future episodes, let us know, guys. We're always open.
Yeah. Oh, I think you have to have a talk with Joey. I think Joey's unaware of something I just mentioned. I thought Joey had to talk with you before. So, anyways, guys, so thank you very much for being with us again tonight, and we hope to hear from you guys again. You'll hear from us again soon. All right.
absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Lori.
Yes, thank you guys for being here.
Very welcome.
Thank you.